She did say she was going out of town this week because I asked her if she was going to. Well, I asked her to come to this crawfish thing. She's at some sort of party. So I lost her phone yesterday. I don't know any of her people. I'm trying to think. Oh my God. We're sending her in. But I know that she was going that she was like into I mean, she might. I don't know. Necessarily want to go into like in-house. I prefer an agency. So that's what I'm looking at right now. All I know is that I want to go home to Birmingham. Like, I'm going to work for a couple years and then to move up north to and work and then come back home. What's your mom? Excited. And she was just, I mean, financially, of course I can make it work, but it's just not ideal 100% to stay here and work financially. But it wouldn't be that. I like Haines, which is one of their spears group. I've been applying to other places. I haven't been applying to places I'm excited to get on this grind.
Oh, there's Loyola guests. It's cool. I don't think I.
Yeah, Loyola, there you go. Loyola guests, you good.
Let's see if I can just get on here.
There you go. Alana, take pictures for me and then send them to me. That's your assignment during the event.
You got the class working.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I hear us. We're live.
They tell you can't leave us. You gotta stay here. So can we graduate? I said, okay, I'll make y'all do it. It's fine.
Is Will coming? Yeah.
He'd say he's coming.
Okay, I figured
He probably, try to the traffic and parking around here is kind of challenging with 2 lane next door and people are getting ready to do their walks in the park across the street. They're walking the park across the street.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's a good campus, good vibe. But growing up, I never came up here. I never came around here growing
Really?
up. Nah. I mean, the only reason you come uptown is to go to the zoo. I mean, now look, all my friends grew up uptown, but I live in the East. That's a whole other world. So,
Right.
so it was the East.
So you never had reason to be over here.
I mean, I was at Xavier, so not too far from here, but I had Xavier, so I didn't come over here.
Right. Right.
Working. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Cultural Lens 2026 Media Identity and the Stories We Tell. My name is Desadra Tesno, and it is truly an honor to stand before you tonight as part of this special event connected to the Marion Stokes Professorship here at Loyola University, New Orleans. The Cultural Lens series challenge us to examine how media shapes public understanding, whose stories are amplified, whose voices are missing, and how representation influences powers. Tonight's speaker embodies that mission.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alyssa Jones, and I'm so excited to help introduce someone whose work reminds us that journalism is not just about reporting facts, it's about reframing narratives. Our guest is a trailblazing journalist and an industry leader and someone who has constantly elevated conversations around race, politics, gender, and democracy in America. She currently serves as the president of the National Association of Black Journalists and one of the most influential journalism organization in the country.
She is also the editor-at-large for the 19th, an independent nonprofit newsroom focused on gender, politics, and policy. In addition, she is a political contributor whose analysis has shaped national conversations across platforms. Throughout her career, she has covered presidential campaigns, the White House, and the intersection of identity and power in ways that challenge traditional narratives. Her work reminds us that reputation still matters, not just in who tells a story, but in how the story is told.
And in the spirit of celebration, we want to share something special. Yesterday was her birthday. So before we go any further, please join us in wishing her a very happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
We are incredibly grateful that she chose to spend part of her birthday week here with us in New Orleans.
As part of the Marion Stokes Professorship, this moment feels especially meaningful. Marion Stokes believed deeply in preserving truth, challenging misinformation, and protecting the historical record. Our speaker carries that same commitment forward, pushing journalism to be more inclusive, more accountable, and more reflective of the community it serves.
Tonight, she will speak on why representation still matters in 2026, reframing the narrative. At a time when newsrooms are shrinking, trust in media is shifting, and public discourse is increasingly polarized. Her voice is both necessary and powerful.
So please join us in warmly welcoming, as well as the person who she will be speaking to, Gregory Lee, who is a professor here, as well as the faculty advisor for the NEBJ student chapter here, the president of the National Association of Black Journalists, editor-at-large of the 19th, and a true leader in modern journalism, Errin Haines.
That was so generous. Thank y'all.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it's going to be a great conversation with Errin. Errin and I, a person of privilege, we go back when you were in college.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, when I was much younger than I turned yesterday.
Yeah. So, Errin actually, we I talk with the students all the time about networking, the spirit of networking. I tell students all the time, that's where you get the contacts and communication and, finding new jobs and stuff. And Errin, she's an embodiment of that. When I was seed chair, basically internship chair of NEBJ, she was the first student who got the NEBJ AP internship.
That was me.
And that was her, and she did a lot of great things from that internship. Had a couple of internships after that, and then she grew up a little bit more, and a few years down the line, she served under me when I was president of NEBJ. She was my vice president.
I mean,
who told you to run for president this time, though?
I mean, I should have learned. And yet, no, I mean, I had to answer the call just as you did at a consequential time for our profession. So it is really just kind of a full circle moment for us to be on the stage together, and really just looking out here. I was just telling your chapter president, Kennedy, that it feels like just yesterday that this was the beginning of my NABJ journey, which of course opened so many doors for me in our profession and affirmed for me over and over again the importance of representation. So to be here talking to you all about why representation matters, why organizations like NABJ matter, of course, when you called and asked, I was like, I got to make it happen. I got to be here with you all.
And we thank you for being here. So we're going to let you, before we do a fireside chat, I'm going to allow Errin to have a few words to set the stage, and then we'll have a conversation. And then afterwards, we'll have some Q&A from the students and guests here. So let's get going.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, hey, y'all. How are you doing? Yeah, having a good media day? Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And I mean, listen, I think I just want to start with a truth that might sound simple, but is really at, I think, the center of everything that we're going to be talking about. And that is that there is no such thing as a neutral story. I don't know what your professors told you. He probably told you that, but every story reflects choices about what gets covered and what gets left out and whose voices are quoted, whose experiences get treated as universal, and whose voices and experiences are treated as specific. Those choices are shaped by our identities. They always have been. That is just a true thing. So when we talk about representation and what it means in 2026, because we're in this age of erasure and exclusion, this is what we're really talking about, and it's important to name that. Who has the power to shape what our country understands to be true? This is something I'm thinking a lot about, particularly as our country is getting ready to mark our 250th anniversary. We're thinking about what it means to be able to be a participant in this democracy. Who gets to be a citizen, right? Who is contributing? Who even do we consider what is defining what it means to be an American right now? And for a long time, we have kind of thought about representation as a diversity issue, right? Who's in the newsroom? Who's on air? Who's at the table? And those things matter. I'm not saying that they don't. It's certainly something that we advocate for at NABJ, but they are not the entire point. Because you can have diversity in the room and still tell the same narrow story. So the real question is not just who is present, but it's who has influence, who has authority, and who gets to define the narrative. Now, for those of you who don't know, I spent most of my career covering race and then the intersection of race and politics, and now the intersection of race, gender, politics, and power. What that lens reveals for me is something that traditional political coverage often misses. And that is that, the whole reason that I helped to start the 19th is because I believe that identity was not a sidebar to power. Identity is one of the primary ways that power operates. Why do I say that? Well, because it shapes which issues are taken seriously, which communities are seen as credible, which voters get courted, and which voters are taken for granted. Now, the media doesn't just report on these kinds of dynamics. We can either be reinforcing those dynamics or we can be challenging them. And so that really brings us to the moment that we find ourselves in now, because in 2026, we're not just in a political moment. We are literally in a battle for who is going to control the information economy. Trusted media is low, as I know I don't have to tell you all. Access is uneven. And there's this active effort in some cases to limit who gets to report and what gets reported. We are seeing this in this anti-DEI climate. We are seeing this as media consolidation is happening. So the stakes of representation really are higher now than they've been in a long time. Because it's not really because representation is new. This is something, NABJ just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and we were founded to advocate for more representation in media. So this is a conversation we've been having for a long time, but what feels new now is that the consequences of getting it wrong are even more visible and feel a lot more tangible. So let me just put it plainly like this. I mean, if people are not seeing themselves in the story, then they can't see themselves in the system. This is what's driving a lot of news fatigue. This is what's making a lot of people, frankly, just look away. They're not seeing themselves reflected in the stories that we're telling about this country. So when that happens, you're not just losing an audience, you're losing trust, you're losing participation, potentially losing civic engagement, right? Because you're losing the sense that democracy belongs to everybody. And that's not just a media problem. What I'm increasingly saying to people, because I see the connection to it, is that this is a democracy problem. We need to think about it in those terms. Now, I also want to situate this in kind of a larger history because I also get to be here with you all. This is Black Press Week, in case you didn't know. And Black Press Week is a reminder of something that we should not forget. And that is that the demand for representation in media did not start in mainstream newsrooms. The Black press is 199 years old this year. It's almost 200 years old. And the Black press started with people who were excluded from those mainstream newsrooms. And the Black press exists because traditional media often fails to tell the full story of who we are as a country. And the Black press is absolutely contributing to the bigger American story. They exist because Black communities needed journalism that saw them clearly and covered them completely. And for generations, the Black press has done exactly that. So I just want to give a nod to the Black press during Black Press Week as we sit here and have this conversation. Now, another thing that we need to talk about is the idea that representation is not just about who tells the story. It's also about who owns the platform that the story is told on. Because ownership is also power. Ownership determines what stories get funded, what risks journalists are taking, what audiences are prioritized, and what editorial decisions are ultimately possible. I know this is something that people in your generation, that younger journalists who are seeing what's happening in our media landscape are thinking about deeply. Now, for a long time in the country, media ownership has been concentrated in ways that really limit whose perspectives can shape the narrative at scale. But what we're seeing, with the internet and really the democratization so much of journalism in, with social media, is that is expanding. So even as we've made progress in terms of who is in the newsroom, and we're also seeing a retrenchment that is resulting in a decline in that diversity that we've worked so hard for. So we have to ask who is going to control the newsroom. So that's part of why we're seeing the growing importance of independent media, which is something that I'm paying a lot of attention to. Obviously helped to start the 19th 6 years ago because we wanted to do things differently, wanted to tell a different story. So you have outlets now that are like mine, mission-driven, that are centered on community, that are often created specifically to fill the gaps that are left out by traditional institutions. But now we're seeing it more broadly. We're seeing digital startups, we're seeing creator-led platforms, we're seing nonprofit newsrooms. How many of you in here are thinking about independent media as maybe something that might be for you? No?
They're gonna learn.
Right, I was gonna say, I mean, listen, this little device here is your friend. Because these spaces are not just alternatives, they are interventions because they are attempting to rebalance who has the power to tell stories and how those stories are going to get told. Now, independent media still operates within larger systems of funding, of distribution, and of visibility. So we have to ask ourselves how we are building media ecosystems where representation exists not just at the level of content, but also in terms of who's controlling it. Now, at my work at the 19th, we think about this all the time. And through my work at NABJ, I see another side of this because representation is also about who gets to do the work and under what conditions they get to do that work. So what does it mean to reframe the narrative? It means that we stop treating representation as an outcome and we start treating it as a method. We have to move from optics, which is so often what representation is about for too many of these companies, to actual power. We have to move from inclusion, somebody just being in the room, to influence, people actually having a say in what stories get told and who gets to have that say. And from presence to authorship, and increasingly from participation to ownership. So we can't just ask if we included diverse voices. We have to ask who defined this story, who funded the story, who benefits from this story. Now, you all are entering this field at a time when the rules are shifting. The platforms are changing, the gatekeepers are changing, and in some cases they are disappearing altogether. But that also means possibility, not just uncertainty. You all are going to inherit this media system, but you are also able to shape what comes next. And that means thinking about not just where you work, but what you're going to build, what you're going to support, and what you're choosing to amplify. So the question is whether we are willing to build a media system and tell a set of stories that actually reflects the country that we live in, because that is the work and that is all of our responsibility. So with that, Greg and I are going to have a conversation, and then I want to hear from some of you.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of different things, and the first things I want to touch on is you covered the Harris campaign last year, and what does it feel in this moment? You know, you had some time to step back after a few months after, you know, looking at the landscape after the fallout after of the coverage. What does it feel like in this moment for women in media in this country and in women in politics, especially in media, in terms of coverage and how you viewed the overall coverage of the presidential campaign from that lens?
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because when I decided to leave the Associated Press, I'd been there for the better part of a decade, to help to launch the 19th. I did that because I was so frustrated with how my profession, I mean, not limited to my employer, I felt like the entire profession was, first of all, too male, too pale, and not covering women the way that we needed to do that. And also, I mean, not writing about gender the way that we were supposed to be doing that, right? I mean, we still, in political journalism, are writing about women like we're some kind of special interest group, as opposed to half the population. Like, why would we be doing that, right? And so when the opportunity came up to try to tell a different story, to shift that narrative, that felt very urgent for me because at that time, it was 2020, 6 women were running for president, right? You had a really diverse field of people running for president, and yet we were still talking about race and gender the same way that we always did, as if things were not shifting, right? And as if that representation was not the story, not just one of the stories that was happening, right? And so, you know, the catalyst for my now boss, our CEO, to starting the 19th was the 2016 election, when, you know, Hillary Clinton runs and you know, is on the brink of history, falls short, obviously, but, you know, she really began to ask, what is it going to take for us to get a woman president? Is that something that's going to happen? And so the idea that, you know, when 6 women stood for president in 2020, she was like, all right, it's time to start this newsroom. We did that. It was the 100th anniversary of suffrage, and in case it's not clear, the 19th is named for the 19th Amendment, which gave some, but not all women the right to vote. Black women were thrown under the bus, by the way, when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1920, which is why, if you've seen our logo, we have an asterisk in it. So fast forward to 2024, it was not on my bingo card that Kamala Harris was going to be running for president again, right? Or that we would have another woman as, you know, the nominee of a major political party as soon as, like, within 6 years of the 19th founding. And so, you know, that felt possible, right? But I will tell you, on the other side of the 2024 election, the first column that I wrote was, you know, is this ever going to happen? Because you had Hillary Clinton, obviously, that didn't happen. You had 6 women run for president. None of them were good enough to be the nominee. And now you had Kamala Harris, who was certainly a talented and capable person who came close, but she also was unable to win. And it, you know, the same kind of questions around electability and you know, what she did or didn't do as a candidate, as opposed to what is it about our electorate that means that this still can't happen, because there were certainly voters for whom this was a barrier. Gender was still a barrier for them in making that choice, and especially juxtaposed with a very specific version of masculinity, right, that was absolutely part of his campaign and how he was able to succeed, right? The manosphere, very much a part of our politics right now.
But there's also another nuance when it comes to the manosphere, when it also comes to ethnic men too.
Yes.
Between black men, Hispanic men, which were stories that were nuanced that no one really talked about.
Correct, because I mean, Joe Rogan leaves no room for what's happening in the black manosphere, what's happening in the Latino manosphere, which a lot of which was happening on Spanish radio, which folks were missing.
Yeah. So when we talk about that representation and how women are, especially women of color, still underrepresented or misrepresented in political coverage, are women still being covered differently when they run for office or lead? Or you still think it's the same stuff? Or has it gotten a bit better?
It's gotten a bit better because there are more women covering politics.
This week we had more women get elected. Pretty much going to go in Illinois. We're going to have probably more than likely the second black woman senator from the state of Illinois.
Third black woman to be serving. I mean, 3 black women are going to be serving in the Senate at the same time for the first time in history, right? And yet, let's take that story for example. So, Illinois primary happens this week. You have 2 black women that were standing for that office. 2 black women that get to run against each other for U.S. Senate. You know how hard it is for black people to win statewide office? It's very hard. Let me just say that, or there'd be more of us. But the lieutenant, one of the candidates was lieutenant governor. She'd been lieutenant governor for 7 years, and so she has experience as an executive in politics. She's running. She's built. Clearly, she built a winning coalition, and yet, what is the focus that we're seeing coming out of her victory? Well, J.B. Pritzker clearly is claiming victory. It's like J.B. Pritzker was also on the ballot, but like this woman won her election, and yet why is the focus on this man and crediting him for her being, clearly she was also a good candidate. Now, yes, did his money help? Absolutely. But like, she built a coalition. She worked hard, and also she was his number 2. It's in his best interest, you know what I mean, to be endorsing her. So, yeah, I mean, some of the framing and some of the narratives that some of my colleagues in political journalism are, I mean, these are choices that we're making.
Well, choices, and we saw that during the last campaign about more of the horse race mentality of coverage, and that's what with Pritzker and this. Coming fast forward,
that's exactly
they're looking at 2028.
It's the 2028 of it all. I mean, which overshadows the thing that she accomplished.
Yeah. So you mentioned about your work at the 19th and at Mission. How does coverage change when women are centered and not added on?
Yeah, I mean, again, women are half the population and half the electorate, and so thinking about women, LGBTQ plus people, gender expansive people as part of our democracy, as part of our electorate. Women's issues could be everybody's issues if we asked other people about them. We just had a story this week, actually. We got any March Madness fans in here? Okay, so here's another thing about March Madness that you may not know. March Madness is a very popular time for men to get vasectomies. Did you know that? Yes, because you can just get your procedure, sit on the couch, and have your frozen peas sitting here, and you can be watching the games. You can just binge basketball all weekend. So
that's new to me. I didn't know that.
It's very popular. This is the most popular time to get that done if you want to get that done, because you can just watch basketball all weekend. But we had a story. So we had a story pointing this out, but also pointing out that more young men are choosing to get this procedure because of the landscape after the fall of Roe.
Yep.
They're thinking this is a thing that I can do for my relationship and reproductive health. How often do we ask men about reproductive health or abortion? We don't ask them. Hello, they're part of the equation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we don't ask them what their thoughts might be. Why? Because abortion is a women's issue. Reproductive rights is a women's issue. No, it's not. They're not the only ones involved, right? And so what does it mean to ask women about the economy? What does it mean to ask, us about education or healthcare more broadly, right? Or anything that is happening in our democracy is something that you can be asking women about. It's something that you can be asking, our queer Americans about. It's something that you can be asking just folks with all kinds of intersecting identities can speak to all kinds of issues because they are living intersectional lives. But that's not how we treat people. We have to ask this group of people about this, and this group of people about this, and this group of people can only speak about this.
I might have you put your NABJ hat on when it comes to this subject.
Yeah.
And as NABJ president, and you've noticed there's a lot of black women who in the forefront of covering issues, and certain people have, let's say, for lack of a better term, disrespected the black women who's on that press.
Absolutely.
How does NABJ try to combat the disrespect of women, especially people of color who are in those spaces? What does the organization do with that?
We call it out. We call it out every time it happens because we have to continue to say that it's unacceptable so that it is not normalized. Because if it can happen at the highest levels of our government, what does that mean for women that are trying to cover, a city council meeting, right? Or a county government meeting? If they have permission, if elected officials have permission to disrespect the media, who, by the way, are just doing their jobs, literally asking questions and trying to hold power accountable, that should draw disrespect and just, completely ignoring their humanity. That is not something that we want to see normalized in a healthy democracy. And so, I became president in August of last year, and one of the first statements that we had to put out was because this had happened again in the White House. And so we had to say, this is not acceptable, and this should not be part of what comes with the job of covering this administration. Because, it's a press freedom issue. It is a free, you don't have a free press if this is the way that people can be treated. And it is gendered because you are seeing this happening to women, but certainly disproportionately, it feels like, to black journalists.
Last year, NMJ celebrated its 50th anniversary, the mission of advocating for journalists to be represented in the newsrooms, to have opportunities to tell stories and framing the narratives and all that. But 2020, after George Floyd, we saw a flood of news organizations hit the diversity train.
Oh, yeah.
And started hiring a lot of black people in high positions: diversity editor, managing editor, editor-in-chief, columnists covering and framing the black experience in news organizations. Fast forward to last year, in 2024, we started seeing really rollbacks. What is the NABJ's mission and job in terms of, first of all, seeing that the first thing that in terms of when bad things happen, such as the economy, and the first thing that goes away is what? Those jobs.
Diversity.
So what does NABJ focus on that and helping try to right that ship, or at least stem the tide? Because we've seen a lot of cutbacks from we saw 6 years ago. It's great to hire black people in newsrooms and in leadership positions, and now it's like the plague.
Yeah, because of this, the anti-DEI sentiment that is happening, that has come from, executive orders almost immediately after this administration took office. What that has meant is, even though the executive orders are not laws, by the way, they are, but they're being treated like laws by many of our institutions, and journalism, I would say, I would include as among the institutions that are treating it like law. And so the chilling effect in terms of coverage, number one, is something that is very concerning, especially when, yes, we just saw 6 years ago, we couldn't talk about race enough, and we couldn't hire black folks fast enough to try to, course correct, but that was very short-lived. And I think a lot of us who have been around long enough to know that this kind of thing does tend to happen in cycles, right? Like there will be, from the time of, the Kerner Commission report in the 1960s that said, mainstream newsrooms need to do a better job of covering the totality of black communities. You can't just go over there when, there's crime or something bad is happening in a community. You have to cover black life more holistically, right? Like that was in the 60s that we said that, right? And back then there was something like 5% of all U.S. Newsrooms had black journalists. That number now is 6%. In 50 years, 60 years. So, what does that mean for NABJ? Well, it means, first of all, that we have to name this, and we have to continue to say that the stories that black journalists are telling about black America are part of the American story. So, the whole idea that, because when you just kind of lump everything under the idea of DEI, not knowing what that means or caring what that means whatsoever, but it's a bad word, right? That acronym becomes a bad word. So then, these stories are seen as stories that we shouldn't be doing, or why should we be focusing on these things? Well, because it is part of what it means to do honest and accurate journalism. If you are not telling stories that are representative of the communities that you are in, you are telling a less honest and accurate story of that community and more largely of this country. So we have to continue to point that out. We have to continue to advocate for our journalists who are in these newsrooms. But like I said in my remarks, we also have to think about, our Constitution, you mentioned our 50 years, our Constitution in 1975, we said, we will also advocate for black journalists who are wanting to pursue entrepreneurship. And so what does that mean in this moment as we are seeing the emergence of independent media? A growing number of our membership is independent media or wanting to be independent media. So how do we empower them with the skills that they need to be able to do that successfully? Because we know that so often we are the trusted messengers in our communities, right? Yeah. And so how are we going to get that trusted information to our people, especially as some of these traditional mainstream outlets are saying, we don't want to tell those stories?
Well, you just mentioned the word trust. And let's just say in the future, we look at the crystal ball and the headwind. We see the headwinds going on right now in the climate. And we see in 2028, there's a certain result that happens. And media organizations start to go back and think it's 2020 again. Hasn't trust already eroded? It has been damaged for what they've done in the last few years of not holding the line in terms of democracy? Yeah,
I think it will be interesting to see where we go from here. Obviously, we are a little bit more than a year into this current administration, and seeing the media's response to this current administration, that has damaged the relationship between some of these places and their audience. Certainly, I know, folks that used to be avid news watchers, right? Especially older black folks that were watching the news, basically all day, it's on in the background. Mm-hmm. They're gone. They're gone now. And why are they gone? Because they don't see anyone or anything that is speaking to them when they watch those newscasts.
Well, there's also news broadcasts in terms of audiences low amongst student generation. As I talk to our students all the time, and you want to be in media, but we want to watch the news. We have to watch the news. But I get it, because there's not that representation there.
What is it on there that's speaking to them?
Right. What is it that news doesn't speak to them? So how?
So it's I tell you, so my niece is 30, and she is well informed, but none of it is coming from anything that she's watching on television. Mm-hmm. It's all coming from here. Yeah. So she has, yes, she follows Auntie on the 19th, but she's also, she's on TikTok, and there are people who she follows on TikTok that she trusts. Are all these people journalists? No. Are some of these people reading journalism that is coming from a reputable place? Most of the time, thank goodness.
Thank God.
But sometimes, Auntie, is this true? But everybody doesn't have a me to come to and say, I saw this online, mis and disinformation, particularly targeting the people that are most online, young people, people of color. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's a reason for that, because you all are seeking out information. You are wanting to know things, and yet the things that are being put in front of you to know are not always accurate. They're not always accurate. And how are you supposed to discern, between what is and what isn't? Because a lot of that is a lot more sophisticated than it is, back when mis and disinformation is not new, but just the level of sophistication, especially with AI, is something that is very new and very scary.
You touched upon media consolidations, and we've seen already what's going on at CBS News. Yeah. We're seeing a fight to Block, the Next Star,
Techno.
Techno deal. We've seen what's going on with Paramount and the possibilities what could happen at CNN. And you mentioned about independent journalism. What can we do to really speed up that process of trying to get supporting more independent journalism? Because there will be, with the combinations and change of voices of these long-time stations, what can we do to try to really, really jumpstart more independent and support that?
Well, there is going to have to be a significant investment from, philanthropy is definitely part of the solution, but what does it mean for
We thought we had
others?
philanthropy with the Washington Post.
Not billionaire savior necessarily. I'm talking, the Knight and Ford Foundations of the world that may be funding other things. Maybe they care about democracy, so they can care about supporting independent journalism. I mean, certainly the 19th, we don't have a billionaire savior, but what we do have is a robust, philanthropic portfolio that keeps us sustainable, right? And that's not only, public, corporate philanthropy, like I said, like Knight and Ford, but it's also just wealthy individuals who believe in the mission of what we're doing and who want to support us. What does it mean but then, you see people that are successful on Substack, for instance. Yeah. That's a $5 a month subscription. But if you can build an audience that's going to get, you got 10,000 people giving you $5.
Some of y'all got like 5,000 people y'all following on social media, or I know I have one student who has like 10,000 followers on TikTok.
Yes, think about if all those people were paying you $10 a month, just to hear what you had to say, you'd be doing all right? So what does it mean for us to think about the trust relationship, how you are building a one-to-one relationship with audience that you feel familiar to them, right? They trust you. You are giving them honest and accurate information. You have learned the tools of this craft here, because you're going to need the tools of the craft no matter what platform it is on, what form it is in. That is the thing, especially with the rise of AI. Like those of us who know how to do this work, trust is going to be its own currency, particularly in the information economy. So figuring that out, and then also helping, not just our young folks, but really anybody who is thinking about doing this, understand the business of our business better and more. Because when we were starting out, there were a lot of us that weren't paying as much attention to the business of journalism. Yeah. We were just happy to come to work, write stories and get a paycheck every 2 weeks. But we didn't know what the health of our news organization was, and would wake up and be surprised when, oh my goodness, we have to lay off people or
shut down sections.
Yeah, things are going on, and it's like, well, wait, I didn't know that we weren't doing well. I thought, I've been working here for all these years, and it's like, no, or they want to go in a different direction, and you don't know that because we weren't going to the business meetings where people were talking about this. So getting folks more literate on how what is happening, the business trends that are happening in our industry also feels very important.
So, during this whole crisis in Minnesota, we were exposed to what independence journalists is about in terms of what we saw with Don Lemon, our Minnesota chapter president, who was arrested.
Georgia Ford.
Yeah, Georgia Ford. How can the organization use that? And Roland Martin, of course, with his independent. How can we, the organization, show that, use that as a model for young people to aspire towards it? How are we equipping our young people to be in those positions, to be in that spot, to be an independent journalist? Now, I'll give you that Don Lemon is different because he had spent millions and millions.
He got that.
He got that money, the exit money. But on just the foundation of it, how can we really encourage our young people to go that route?
Yeah, look, I think establishing. I think that this is something that young journalists are thinking about increasingly. Especially if they are already online, already connecting with audiences online. How do I then, get the journalism foundation that I need to do that and build audience? I think that you're right. Don obviously had a pretty good head start.
Yeah, pretty good head start.
I would say the same for Joy Reid, whose show on YouTube is also doing well. But you think about Georgia and also Roland. These are people who had to build their independent media. That was not something that happened for them overnight. That, Georgia, before she was arrested and becomes, kind of a nationally known name, she was covering Minneapolis day in and day out. But she built trust in that community and trust that people in that community were willing to support. And so that is a large part of how she has been able to support herself and do this work. Roland certainly started out, he was somebody that was in traditional media, leaves and decides that he's going to start his own thing. And, he had to build that as well over years, but now has a studio, now has, some other journalists that are working with him. And is able to do it. Yes, but what he is doing on YouTube and streaming, that is a place where he is meeting our, audiences where they are, meeting so many of us in Black America where we are, and that is resonating with people. And so, that's something that they're also willing to support.
So this is my last question before we go to the audience. You mentioned about the entrepreneurship, and you were founding editor, founding editor of the 19th. What have you learned about, I know you learned a little bit, what have you learned about the entrepreneur side, the business side of the 19th, doing basically that nonprofit, philanthropic journalism? What have you learned, since we talked about how we didn't have any clue when we're coming up about it?
One of the main things that I've learned is that we have to make the case. We cannot just assume that people love journalism, that people want to support journalism. Like, if we are not going to go out and tell people why it is worth it to trust us and show them that we are worthy of being trusted, if we are not willing to remind them of the importance of journalism as part of our democracy, I think now we're in a climate where a lot of people are realizing the relationship between healthy journalism and healthy democracy, but that was something that I think a lot of people took for granted. And we as a profession took for granted that people understood that. So we have to say that. And we also have to say, and if this is important to you, we need you to support us, right? Internet comes, we're giving away journalism for free.
Yep, just like,
Right?
Yeah.
Something's free, people aren't gonna value it as much.
Nope.
And now we're asking people to pay, and they're like, I don't know if this is something that I feel like is worth it. Well, we have to make the case to them that it is worth it. And so that is certainly a big part of what I do, in addition to, writing a column and whatever else I have to do as editor at large. But like, part of my job is making the case to people who may support us about why this work matters and why independent media is important and is part of what it means to tell a more honest and accurate story about this country.
Yeah, and also you had to add along the way being president of NABJ and that experience.
There you go. And we have to make the case to folks about that too, because again, as we're seeing these media companies consolidate, making clear choices about who they want to come with them into whatever their future is going to look like, a future that is decreasingly including us, right? What does it mean for us to make the case to potential donors about the importance of NABJ, but also the importance of NABJ being independent and sustainable, and our members becoming increasingly independent and sustainable?
Yeah, this year the conference is in her hometown.
It is.
And it's funny because life is funny. When my first year as president, my first year was in my hometown, in New Orleans. So I think you have some success because being at home, it means a lot. And I think that you're going to do well at home. And now it's time for some questions. We have the microphone that'll come around to hand off. But I would like, especially your students, you need to ask some questions. This is what we want. This is what you want to do. And you got someone who's been doing this and doing the work nationwide. And let's get some questions.
Hi. Wow. Hi, I'm Reagan Errin. I'm a mass communication student at Xavier University. And I just wanted to hear more about your personal experience, because I know you said about working in environments that were male and pale. I think that's what you said. And I just wanted to hear more about how you overcame those barriers working in such a diverse environment in journalism.
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And what I would say, so my first internship was at the Daily World, the Atlanta Daily World in Atlanta, which is where I'm from. And it was one of the oldest continuously publishing black newspapers, right? And I say that because that experience was so formative for me in terms of understanding that black stories mattered. I got to cover everything from City Hall to writing about a local business that was opening to, people running for office, all these different parts of black life, right? Like I got to write about them. A lot of times my stories got put on the front page of the newspaper, so I knew these stories were important, right? And I knew that I shouldn't have to argue to an editor that these stories were worth covering, that my people were worth covering. And so that was something I took with me throughout my career, even after I left, that all-black newsroom. I took that with me, and I understood that our stories are worth telling and that they are part of the American story. So, fast forward, I'm in different newsrooms where I was one of the few, or in some cases one of the only, and that was hard. It's challenging because, you don't always, but for you, some stories might not get told, and maybe there's some other stuff that you want to write about that has nothing to do with race, right? But then you think, well, if I'm not going to tell these stories, maybe they won't happen, and my community needs me to show up and do these stories. And so I did feel a real sense of urgency to bear witness on behalf of my community, to go the places where, people in my community couldn't go and ask questions of important people on their behalf, right? That was important to me. But also, I will tell you, from the beginning, I had no idea. I was telling somebody this earlier. I didn't know I wanted to be a journalist. Growing up, I didn't have anybody in my family. I didn't know anybody that was a journalist. So when I got to college, my mom's looking at me like, "What are you going to major in? What are you going to do?" And based on my kind of interests and skills, journalism sounded like something I could do, right? So but I didn't really know how to go about that. And I was so fortunate that I saw in my alternative newspaper that there was a meeting of this organization called the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists. They meet, the third Saturday of every month at this place. And I was like, well, let me show up here and see what happens. And when I tell you the rest was history, literally go there, introduce myself as a student. I want to be a journalist. Can anybody here help me? And did they ever? Let me shadow them in their newsrooms, encouraged me. There weren't a lot of black students at my school when I was in college. There certainly weren't a lot of black students working on the newspaper. So where was I going to find community that looked like me to help me figure out, how to do this, to ask the things that maybe I was embarrassed or didn't know how to ask about. And so they were the ones who encouraged me. They were the ones who pushed me forward and said, you can do it. Made sure that I got to my first NABJ convention, and made the connections that I needed to make, and got every internship that I got was because of NABJ. My first few jobs that I got were because of somebody that I'd met or a connection that I made either at a conference or through somebody else that was a member. To be honest with you, the very first job that I got that was not NABJ related was the 19th. But I will tell you that everything that I had done up to that point prepared me to take the role that I have now, and to be very clear about the kinds of stories that I wanted to tell, that I knew were important. I write for and about black women for the most part, because I know that we are the backbone of democracy, and I know that we have not always been treated that way. We continue to not be treated that way. And so that I get to say that, day in and day out, at a newsroom where I am one of the few black women in our industry that is, top of the masthead, like that means a lot. But none of that would have happened without the encouragement that I got early on in my career from people who weren't necessarily in my newsroom, but who were part of this organization that I was also a part of that told me that I could do it.
And look, we talk about a lot of our young people we were on the same age, a couple of years apart. And
yeah, he's older.
Yeah, I'm older, of course. But it was digitally because a lot of us, just like you, me, we're one of the few there who are in our newsroom representing. But what we had was friends around the country, and we just email each other questions.
We were on the group chat.
We were on the group chat all the time.
We were on the group chat because we were. A lot of us we were alone, and you're trying to figure out how to tell a story, or maybe you want to tell a story, and you're getting pushback from an editor that doesn't really think that's a story, or maybe we shouldn't talk about that. And it's like, well, I think it's important. Does anybody else think maybe this is good? And so for somebody else who looks like you to say, no, that is good. Like you do have the right instincts. You should do this. That was extremely confidence building at a young age.
Ms. Frank.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alana Frank. I'm a mass comm major here and a part of this lovely NABJ group here at the chapter here. My question is to you is, how can young journalists balance wanting institutional credibility with wanting the freedom to tell stories differently?
Yeah, I mean, what is institutional credibility these days? No, I'm serious. Like, what is institutional credibility these days? So many of these institutions, their credibility has been damaged.
Yeah.
And so, what does it mean for you as an individual to have credibility? What does it mean for you? I mean, because so many times what we're seeing now is especially for journalists who are telling the truth, who are coming across as honest and credible and accurate consistently, people are with them because of who they are, not because of where they work. When that person goes somewhere else or starts their own thing, those people are with them because they believe in what that person is doing. It's not about, wherever the place is that person works. If that person is gone, people notice, they're upset. They're like, well, this person was telling me what was going on. Where am I supposed to find out what's going on now? And so when they find out where that person ends up next, they usually are right there with them because they have established credibility. These institutions decreasingly, the credibility for them, they have not shown themselves because they're abandoning their audiences a lot of the time. And so that is making it difficult for them to hold on to those audiences when they are getting rid of the people who they felt were helping them to understand what is happening in the country.
We got a couple here. There you
go. So hi, my name is Kate Stewart.
Nice to see you.
And so in Trump's first term and now this term, I've noticed that, like y'all said, a lot of people don't really like to pay attention to the news just because of how overwhelming it is and how pessimistic it makes people feel. So how do you advocate for representation when you have an audience that doesn't really want to pay attention?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's real. News fatigue is real for people. They're just like, so much is happening. I don't want to pay. I just want to go, do Pilates or see what Punch the Monkey is up to tonight. I got to stop watching those videos.
Yeah,
but
you got to stop watching.
I'm very invested in Punch's future. But no, I mean, there was a recent Pew study that said, some of the most influential people online in talking about politics that's not the thing that they lead with. They're doing a get ready with me video, or they're showing you their outfit of the day, and they're sprinkling in what's going on in the news, right? So, it's not that people don't care. People feel overwhelmed a lot of times, and so if it's just feeling like you got to meet people where they are. If it's feeling too much like traditional media, they're going to keep scrolling, right? But if they're seeing you doing or saying something interesting, or if you are connecting with them as a person, or you have something else about you that maybe draws them in, and so you can get to that political conversation or that journalism conversation later. But if you're just hitting them over the head with that all the time, I can't blame people for not necessarily having the interest or the capacity for that.
So you're saying we should lead the news or with the Bachelorette news, then get into the real news?
Yes. I have seen people, like I said, people are getting ready, and then the next thing you know, they're talking about the SAVE Act, and I'm like, wait, what just happened here? But before you know it, like you've already been watching, and now you're in, and you're finding out about some bill that you never thought that you cared about or were interested in. It's like, well, I didn't know about that. But also, what's that skin cream she was using? I need to know about that too. So, whatever works right now. Seriously, as long as you are honest and accurate and trusted and practicing credible journalism, I think there was the respectability of it that requires things to be presented in a certain way, that's fallen away.
Yeah.
Because we got to get people. Yeah.
Hi. My question actually would piggyback off of that. I feel like with news recently, at least based off my experience, a lot of it is discouraging, especially with what's going on. And I was wondering what you think are the harder or more uncomfortable questions that people, especially those either not of color or in a different case, a different gender, should be asking to ensure real support that leads to actual lasting change, or how to get information across that's like, here's what's happening, but in maybe a little, I wouldn't say like trying to be naive about a situation, if that kind of makes sense, but I don't know if that question.
So, I mean, listen, here's what I think I understand what you're saying, and what I would say to that is that joy and hope are also strategies, right? I mean, that is true. This is also, to your point, Kate, your question about people being fatigued by the news, is because so much of it is discouraging, right? Meanwhile, there are other things that are happening in the country that are joyful, that are hope, that are giving people reasons to have hope. And so what does it mean to cover those stories alongside all of the things that feel bad and heavy and dark all the time? I mean, this is certainly something that we think about at the 19th, and you know, part of that is showing how folks are actually continuing to have agency in our democracy, what they are doing to push back against things that they feel like are not right, or perpetuating inequality, so that people know, you know, somebody might see that story in a community where they may be the only one that is standing up for this thing, but to read a story about a group of people in another part of the country that is also fighting for that thing too, like that helps them to feel like they're not alone, right? Because that's also a big part of why people are kind of checking out. And then, I mean, look, I will tell you that we have leaned into covering women's sports a lot more at the 19th, because yes, I can read this story about my rights being taken away, and then I can also read this story that I want to read about how women just advocated for better pay in the WNBA and they just won, and that feels good, right? Or you know, what's going on with all the women that were dominating in the Winter Olympics, and what that, you know, like people can hold space for both, and a lot of times people can come into our coverage. They are encountering us because they are seeing a story that does not feel so dark, and then they may read some of the other stuff, or they may not necessarily start reading some of the other stuff. But the idea that we're not just offering stories that are perpetually talking about how bad things are for people, and kind of taking away people's agency like that. That is not, I mean, I think for us, what we want is we want to tell stories about our country that help people to feel empowered to participate in this democracy.
Thank you. And then just one more question, kind of backing that up. Like, I feel like being younger, it's like we talked about, it's not really common to like open discussions that should be open. What do you think is like the best way to navigate difficult conversations, maybe with two different generations? Like my viewpoint and my grandparents' viewpoint are very different. And I feel like maybe sometimes there's a lot of like emotion involved and stuff. How would you go about opening conversation where you know there's going to be disagreement, or I feel like
Yeah, I mean, look, I think empathy in journalism is not something that we talk about enough, but it's important, especially because things are so polarized now, right? It is difficult for people to see each other's humanity when we just are tending to think of each other as being on one team or another, right? So what does it mean to have empathy? Well, part of it is, I guess to use your example with your grandparents, like you have a starting point because you're in relationship together, right? So if we have a relationship, we can establish a rapport that then creates a space for us to have a conversation. And maybe we're not going to agree, but that doesn't mean that it has to be combative, right, or adversarial. But I can hear you, and you can hear me, and then we can try to move forward from there. But like if there's no relationship, I mean, it's just, and someone is, and both sides can be dug in on something, like there is no way forward.
Just to piggyback on that, do you think that was exploited in 2016? And I think the media has been responsible for that. They just told like the media never covered the middle of the country.
Oh, well, I mean, absolutely. You know, who again, when we are making choices about whose thoughts and opinions matter, or asking people to kind of unpack what they mean when they say a certain thing instead of just dismissing them because you don't agree with what they said, or what they said is even wrong, right? It's like, well, where are you getting this information? Why do you feel that way? What else is happening in your life that is making this thing that is maybe not true? Why is this resonating with you so strongly? And if you can actually have a conversation with somebody to understand kind of the forces that are shaping that worldview, right? That is insightful. That is going to be helpful. I mean, because I think what happened in the last decade or so, like we are covering an electorate that we don't really necessarily know.
No, we don't.
But also, too many people in this country are just strangers.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not in community with each other, and we are not in community with the people that we're supposed to be covering. Yeah.
Any other questions? We got a couple in the back. Oh, you got one. Yeah, a couple in the back up there. Yeah.
Getting your steps in.
Get your steps in.
Hi, my name is Amari Winchester. I am a mass comm student here at Loyola, and I guess I wanted to touch more on going along with the curve with journalism in the industry today, because while we're heading more towards social media and more independent journalism, do you think that it's going to be like that for a while, or should we as future journalists or mass comms in this space should get used to like things flipping around?
Well, what I think is that it is so important for you all to make yourself as versatile as you can while you are here. I think when we were in school, you know, you were in school because you wanted to be a print journalist, or you wanted to be a broadcast journalist, or, you know, you wanted to be a certain kind of journalist. And I don't think that model really necessarily works anymore. I mean, if you had told the college version of me that I would write a column that I then might have to go on cable news to talk about, that I would be either hanging out on other people's podcasts or having my own like I did not see any of that for myself. But like that I was interested and open to all of those things is what has helped me remain kind of viable and nimble in the industry. So like you are here if you are curious about, okay, how do I strengthen my writing more? How do I, if I'm interested in figuring out what's going on behind the camera, if I'm interested in producing, how can I strengthen my skills as, you know, editing? Maybe I do want to, you know, go see what's going on with radio and potentially look into what it means to podcast. What, you know, if I had to be on air, like how, you know, what media training is there for me to maybe practice doing that? So like, because you don't necessarily know even, I mean, things are changing so fast in our industry right now. what this is going to look like when you all are coming out of school. Like, we don't even necessarily know that. I mean, but I think, you know, everybody here is trying to prepare y'all for that as much as they can. But it really helps, again, like studying the business of our business to see where things are going and what skills these newsrooms are looking for too, as they are kind of evolving and figuring out who they want to be. I think that is also something that's really important.
One more over there.
How you doing? How you doing?
Good.
I'm Chris Pouncey, senior here at Loyola University. I am majoring in mass communications journalism, and I have a few questions for y'all. My first question for y'all is, in today's era, what separates a good journalist from a great journalist?
Geez, that's a good question. I think, you know, I mean, a good journalist can go out and they can get the story and they can come back and they can tell you what happened. You know, that is perfectly serviceable work. Great journalist is going to help their audience make meaning of the thing that they just saw that happened and understand why it matters. The people who are most successful so often are connecting with audience, and a lot of times that's because the audience is looking to that person to not just tell me what happened, but tell me why I should care. And people who are good at telling you why you should care are, I think, some of the greatest journalists.
And to piggyback, making an extra call, 2 or 3 calls. I mean, putting extra work in is probably what separates the great from the good. Going the extra step, because like you said, serviceable. I've got a lot of good journalists who do the story, turn
they can
it
go
in,
to the press conference,
go to the press
they can
conference,
get what they need
knock
to get.
it out, and go home and have a good time. But the extra that great journalists go the extra mile, might miss dinner with family.
But they're going to be curious.
Yep.
They're going to try to have another conversation, maybe on the side after press conference is over. Like they're invested in the story.
What's your other questions, Chris?
Yeah.
My next question is, as a mass comm student who's actively pursuing to have a career in sports and broadcast journalism, what skills should I prioritize to stay competitive in today's media landscape?
Yeah, sports journalist. What skills should he pursue?
Write, and don't write once a week. Write one every day. I mean, it's only going to get good. It's like riding a bike. You got to exercise those skills. Participate. You know, I always tell, and I tell the students all the time, if you can't cover your community on campus, you can't cover my community when I hire you. If you don't have the discipline and time to put in the work in your lab and campus, how would you expect someone to be like when I look at your resume and I say, you didn't work on your campus paper? You didn't do anything outside? Then why would I hire you? So I think the brushing up those skills and understanding community will translate into the real world. I'm a very big sticker on that.
Well, I can't echo enough. I mean, the importance of writing. You all would be surprised at how many, well, yeah, maybe y'all wouldn't. Maybe you see this in your own friend groups or whatever, but like, I am astonished at how many people are just not strong writers.
Because they spend their time writing in text. So they're not writing complete thoughts. They're not being, no, it's real. When you're a creature of habit. And you get those
I know people our age that are not.
Well, that too. There's
good
people
writers.
like that too.
But
yeah.
I mean, certainly now, I mean, between AI and texting, your ability to think critically is going to separate you from your peers for sure. Because if there's a device that is thinking for you or making things easier, AI is not the devil. I'm not somebody that is saying that. But it should be a thought partner and not doing the heavy lifting.
AI can't help you on deadline. When you like in
That's
crisis
so true.
mode, what are you going to do? Call AI to say how to deal with a story?
How do I cover this hurricane?
So you can't depend on
I should put that in there and see what it says. I'm curious.
Yeah, we should do that. How to cover hurricane AI, see what it says.
How do I cover this hurricane right now?
Yeah, and see what it tells us. You got anything else?
I actually got one more question.
All right. Go ahead.
Since I'm also an NABJ student here on this campus, shout out to all my NABJ students down here.
I love it.
Shout out to my chapter. As a member of NABJ, I'm curious, what role do you think like this organization can play in like pushing real change in newsrooms beyond just networking?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have to continue to stress to these outlets that our people are as talented, as capable, as valuable. Because like he said, when we're seeing these cuts that are happening in these newsrooms, diversity is often the first casualty, because so many of these people are the last ones to be hired, or they're younger people, right? And so then they're the ones that get cut when it's time to make cuts, and that is not acceptable to us. We continue to say that to these newsrooms. It's not just about inviting them to our conventions and being nice. It's no, what are you doing to make sure that your newsrooms are representative of the communities that we care about, that need trusted information from people that they feel are representing them. We have to keep saying that. And like I said, at the same time, we have to also empower our members who are increasingly independent-minded and want to figure out how they can do that and also be successful. So it's not an either or, because we do still need representation in traditional newsrooms. That is not something that should go away at all. And we should continue to push for that, and we do continue to push for it. But we also know that owning our own, whether that is us being independent journalists or whether that is starting our own things, figuring out how to do that is also part of what has to be part of this equation in this new normal.
And I'm encouraged too, because I saw there's two major news organizations that were created and founded by a couple 30-year-old kids. The Athletic was founded 10 years ago by a couple of 30-year-old, I call them kids because I was older, you know. And then 10 years, 8 years later, they sold it for $500-something million to the New York Times in front of for sports. So there is a possibility if you have a good business plan, find the right partners, but it is possible. So I always thought, you know, for myself, but the younger Greg, I never thought that I could see that. But now seeing these younger people doing it, it is in the realm of possibility if you have the right vision, the right dedication, and of course those gentlemen, especially the ones who sold the Athletic for $500 million, it can be done.
Thank y'all so much.
Of course.
We got the stream. So
He's coming.
he's coming out. He's getting the steps in.
One question popped up. What are some signs that a newsroom has diversity in appearance, but not real influence behind the scenes? Because I know me, like when I get out of college, like I'm looking for a job, and I'm like, I want to be able to find somewhere that has real inclusivity, and it's not just, you know, for appearance.
Mm-hmm.
That's like my fear, you know.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good instinct to have. So, are there? What does senior leadership look like at that outlet? Right? Is there diverse leadership in that news organization? If so, how is that showing up in the coverage? Right? If you are going to their website or watching their newscast, are you seeing an organization that is making choices that feel representative of the entire country as opposed to a certain set of the country, right? And so what does that say about how they're going to treat the kind of work that you may want to do? You have to think about that. If diversity is, you know, they may have diversity, but a lot of their diversity is mostly entry level, or, you know, they don't really have a lot of people that are, you know, at the top that are diverse. That imbalance also tells you, oh, well, you think that it's okay to hire us and maybe not pay us as much as you would pay, you know, a newsroom leader or you don't think that newsroom leadership needs to be diverse, and that perspective is valuable and worth having as a part of your senior leadership team. Well, what's that about? I think that those are the kind of things that signal, whether a place is serious or not. And even if you can have kind of the optics of diversity, but if it's not showing up in the coverage, does it really matter that you have those people in the room or on staff?
Anyone else have any questions? All righty. We'd like to thank you, Madam President, for coming and joining us in conversation. And we're going to have a reception, light refreshments outside, so you can mingle a little bit.
Yeah.
And looking forward to that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank y'all. Hey there. You want to just do it right over
She
here?
was a Xavier student, so she's all right. She's a Xavier student. I got you.
See, you got to work too.